but the technologies to realize transition already exist, and they're outcompeting polluting fossil power in the majority of countries. Renewables were over 80% of new electricity generating capacity in 2021, but many countries need help to overcome the technical, financial, and social barriers to scaling up clean power more rapidly. That's where the Energy Transition Council comes in. We've come together as over 30 governments and major institutions. We've held 6 ministerials, 14 country dialogues, and many more strategy sessions with local partners. And we're enabling better in-country coordination of governments, international partners, and investors to mobilize assistance and finance. To address any gaps in international support, we launched the Rapid Response Facility to deliver on the priorities raised by countries in their national ETC dialogues, now responding to 27 requests for support in 9 countries, with 10 more requests in the pipeline. ETC partners are also mobilizing longer-term, large-scale assistance for the coal-to-clean power transition for countries that will continue beyond the UK's COP26 presidency. One of the most crucial aspects to scaling up renewables is strengthening and expanding grids. That is why India and the UK have been advancing the Global Green Grids Initiative, One Sun, One World, One Grid, to accelerate cooperation on regional grid projects in Africa and the Asia-Pacific region. And following the launch of the International Just Transition Declaration last year, signatories have been working to advance a just and inclusive transition. In other aspects of the UK's energy transition campaign, we're working with international partners to enhance product efficiency and engaging with partners through the Powering Past Coal Alliance and No New Coal Compact, where countries continue to come forward to consign coal to history. The campaign is also leading an initiative to shift international public support out of fossil fuels and into clean energy. Each of us needs to continue taking bold and ambitious actions to accelerate the transition to clean energy, strengthening the climate leadership shown by international partners under the COP26 and COP27 presidencies, to continue the work of the Council after Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh, in the United Arab Emirates, and beyond.
Hello everybody, can you hear me? Yes, I think the microphone is on. Welcome to this event. It's good to see you all, and it's brilliant to have this brilliant lineup of panelists next to me. My name is Rhian Kelly and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer at National Grid. We've been involved with ETC in a number of initiatives. ETC, you've seen the video. A sort of couple more things that I might just flag to you before we get going. One, that it's a sort of it's been set up for 2 years. It enables dialogue between countries that require support for the energy transition on the one hand, and then also major international actors offering support to fund, coordinate and implement tailored solutions more rapidly. It provides global political finance and technological leadership to over 30 governments and institutions, and provides support in a range of areas, so things from integrated planning, green grids and energy efficiency. And the Rapid Response Facility was set up in March of last year as a sort of, exactly as it says on the tin, to make sure we can do things quickly. It's a hub and spoke model. 25 programs and working with international partners who are the spokes, and it's really a rapid response to requests for technological, commercial and regulatory political assistance. We've been involved at National Grid and so we're delighted to be here today. We've been supporting technology support and sharing some of our best practice. As I understand, and somebody can correct me if this is wrong, I've had 27 requests for the facility so far, and there are 10 requests in the pipeline. I'm working across countries like Morocco, the Philippines, clean cooking in Kenya, and just transition work in India. Hopefully the panel will be able to give you far more better examples of exactly what has been happening. And it's going to last, this facility will last out until 2025. So what I'm going to do is try and keep it informal, try and keep it conversational. We might ask for some audience participation, so if you've got questions that come up, do put your hands up. We'll bring you in as much as we can. I think it would be worthwhile if each panelist just did an opener on, you know, what's your role, what's your position, how have you been working with ETC and the RRF, and then after that I've got a few more detailed questions. You'll note, I should say, that Deputy Director Faith Wandera is not here. So Matt Webb has very kindly, with about 2 minutes notice, stepped in. So I'm not going to go to him first. I'm going to go to the far end, give him a chance to work out what he's going to say. We have a vague plan, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm sure you've got lots of value to add, so thank you. Do you want to kick off?
Yes, thank you.
And I've been told you need to hold the microphone level and close to your... Yeah.
I sat at
better than me.
I sat at the far end. I felt safe down here, but that's okay. So my name is John Cotton. I'm the Senior Program Manager of the Energy Transition Partnership. The Energy Transition Partnership is a multi-donor platform working in Southeast Asia. We bring together governments and philanthropies. From the government side, our donors include the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Canada. And from the philanthropies, we have the Children's Investment Fund, Sequoia, IKEA Foundation, and more. These members are united with a shared ambition to expedite the energy transition in Southeast Asia. It's great today to see so many people from that ecosystem and from the ecosystem that we have benefited from being members of the ETC and RRF. So I see the Power and Pass Coal Alliance, E3G, Climate Compatible Growth, Green Map. These are all part of the ETC, and this is really how the Energy Transition Partnership has benefited from its membership and supported the expedition of the energy transition in Southeast Asia. So as we'll keep it short here, I'll just give one example of a tangible project. In Vietnam, under the Rapid Response Facility, we responded to a request to do an abatement scenarios paper. This abatement scenario was the first step in Vietnam to look at the future without coal, or at least with a reduced coal. We were advised it was too ambitious, but ETP as technical agents were able to leverage on the RRF's political network, deliver this paper, and we believe, or we understand, it led to the announcement from Vietnam last year at COP26 to their net zero pathway. So nice to meet you all.
Rebecca, you've got the mic, so do you want to come in next, talk a bit about who you are and just so your links into ETC and the Rapid Response Facility?
Thank you. Can you all hear me? Hi, I'm Rebecca Collier, and I work for the European Climate Foundation and a collaboration of philanthropies that work on technical assistance called the CRUX Alliance. And both the European Climate Foundation and the CRUX Alliance have been delighted to be philanthropic funding partners of the Energy Transition Council and to participate in the RRF meetings when the technical assistance requests come through, to be able to decide if we want to fund, or indeed if one of our key partners that we've been incubating over the years, like the Coal Asset Transition Accelerator, might also want to engage in the RRF. And so we've been part of this journey as people who are funders, but also people who are learning. And I want to really stress the process of learning in the ETC. We've learned about the timelines for good TA, we've learned about the political priorities, and we've learned about collaboration with multilaterals. And so I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's where I come from on this panel, is from the philanthropic donor community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakob. It'd be great to hear from you and just give us a sense of your position and your link into ETC and RRF.
I'm Jakob Mulugeta. I'm based at University College London, but also I'm the partnership lead for the Climate Compatible Growth Program, which is a FCDO supported program providing technical as well as research support to supporting low carbon transitions in mostly in African and South Asian countries. largely focusing on energy and transport. So in terms of of course, CCG colleagues provide the technical support needed for some of the RRF work, and that's really where I come in. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Now, Matt, I've given you 5 minutes, so it's your moment.
That's plenty long enough. Very pleased to step in. So Matthew Webb, I'm Deputy Director in Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy. But more importantly, I guess, my sort of association with this area of work goes back to the joint work with the COP unit, sort of, which kicked off 2 years ahead of Glasgow. And actually, strangely, I can give away my old years. I can say this probably goes back a few more years than that, because one of the models I think which has been really interesting, and I think we're going to talk about today with the ETC and the RRF, is this really strong collaboration, not just between governments and a political dialogue, but actually a seamless join up with high ambition external partners. And that's, I think, the role of philanthropy in this space, the role of the partners around the ETC, as well as the really critical technical institutions, has made this such a strong hybrid. And the reason I mention that is it's something we learned a little bit about when we were working on some of the work around Power and Pass Coal Alliance, that really interesting idea of government diplomacy plus technical plus NGO institutions coming together with real force. So I'm going to say a few more about where that might go going forward, but I'm happy to be sort of slightly the elderly voice who's providing a bit of context, maybe.
I'm going to mix things up a bit. Rebecca, I wanted to sort of come to you first with a question. You talked about the way that philanthropy is playing a role, and I just wondered whether it seems unusual, and so I wanted to, could you talk a little bit more about that, explain what you've been doing, give some examples, bring it to life for us?
Thank you. So philanthropy really likes to see itself as a catalytic change maker, enabling partners and ecosystems to deal with some of the world's greatest existential threats more quickly and in a more just and equitable way. So when we heard that there was going to be a rapid, fast, transparent technical assistance collaborative aimed at helping governments with some of the tricky questions that they had in the run-up to COP26, with a particular view on the power sector, which is one of the most polluting, urgent sectors to fix fast, and with a view on just transition, we felt this was an innovation that we wanted to be part of. We don't want to replicate the hard work of the bilateral and the multilateral donors. We think they have a very particular funding space, but we do want to see civil society groups, we do want to see good consultation, and we also want to see excellence in collaboration and in the technical assistance that goes on within these platforms. And so it was with that in mind that we were delighted to join the ETC. I think we also felt it had a really special combination of the political, the ministerial meetings, and then the offer of the support to back it up in real time and quite nimble. It's quite usual that technical assistance programs take a while to get going. They're baked in for a long period of time, and they're very closely tied to the bilateral relationships of donors. And the ETC was unique because it was tied to an outcome that was both transformative and political, which was really sold to us as the earlier transformation away from coal into clean energy and the pathways to do that. And so it was for that reason that nimbleness, that political connectivity, the urgency of the task at hand, and the nature of the collaboration, the openness and the learning, that we felt the ETC had something quite special to offer. I would also say the fact that it also had the recipient countries really front and center felt to us somewhat different from some of the other technical collaborations that we'd seen before. And so John represents the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, which works really closely with governments in the region. The fact they were there gave us confidence that the ETC was going to be listening very well to those governments. So that was the secret sauce for us.
Well, that's fascinating. Thanks for sharing it. And actually, you've prompted me because I was going to ask John next about technical assistance in Southeast Asia. What's worked well? What's not worked so well? What have you learned? What does it look like going forwards?
Okay. Thank you. So maybe I'll just build on your point. And one reason I think the ETP and ETC has worked so well together and there's been a synergetic relationship is that ETP is designed to be a responsive program. So not a bilateral or a structured program built out of a capital city over several years, but an entity put on the ground to respond. So as governments increase their climate commitments, our aim is to be there to support them with all of the ambition they've just set in terms of their policy realignment. So through the ETC, we've had this opportunity, the ETC through their political dialogue, and then through the RRF in presenting opportunities to execute, we have been able to pick these projects up and move quickly. We are also very rapid, and this has led to great success actually. So in the Philippines, we're just finishing now work we picked up post COP26 from the RRF. We've redesigned the energy market for battery energy storage in the Philippines. So battery energy storage can now be realized in the Philippines. We've redesigned the grid code in order that, let's say, it's more renewable energy friendly. So the role of, to answer your question, sorry, more directly, the role of technical assistance from my perspective is it's a combination of social, political, technical, economic, having all of this and proving the feasibility. Once this feasibility is proven, then the governments have the confidence to make the commitments. It's not the entire role of development partners and technical assistance to do this, but we have a role to play. We have a role to bring in international expertise to support this decision making and to perform technical and capacity transfers within the country. So what is the condition on the ground now? I think the fact that the 3 most populous countries in Southeast Asia where we work and 3 countries dependent on coal, so Indonesia, Philippines and Vietnam, have all made strong climate commitments. Indonesia, no coal phase out by 2050. Philippines, a new government have reaffirmed their coal moratorium. And Vietnam, their net zero 2060 commitment is not only strong, but they have mobilized all government units to push in this direction. This in part is to do with the work of the ETC, RRF, ETP and all the other development partners in the room. You asked me what more can be done or what less can be done. So a long list of more. I sometimes hear that it's a crowded space of development partners in the region. I don't agree with this. There's room for a lot more mobilization, a lot more funds. How it's organized and delivered, there's space for improvement for sure. But we need more government ownership. And as development partners, we need to empower the governments so that they have ownership. And I think JETP is maybe the icing on the cake in driving this forward. It's really blasted open the policy window. So I see JETP as a complete redefinition of the space. We need more collaboration. This is obvious. I don't want to go into this. I keep hearing it. It sounds a bit soundbitey, but let's say we need a collaborative mindset. We need to find ways to drive the same messaging, such as easy ones that are easy to agree on, no new coal, levelling the playing field for renewable energies, removing subsidies from fossil fuels and channeling them to renewable energies. These are all easy things that we can collaborate on and come more. Less, I don't know less. Maybe I think there's already a lot of good platforms, a lot of good initiatives. ETP brings governments and philanthropies together. The MDBs have the platforms for delivering funds. The RRF and ETC are there for the political dialogue. So what I think we need more of is so I wouldn't say less platforms, but we need more use of the platforms that exist. And anybody coming into the space is welcome to join these platforms and make these platforms stronger as we also try to make the governments and their platforms stronger so we can move forward and deliver at speed.
Of course. Thank you. That was really helpful. Jakob, it would be great to get your view from the sort of academic research institutions perspective working together with policymakers, including through the RRF. So what has worked, and have you got any examples of the sort of things that you've been doing in this space?
Thank you. Well, I think academics working with policymakers. Of course, you know, this has been happening for quite some time. What makes this the working with the ETC quite unique, though, is that often technical assistance type of work and research, they don't often sit comfortably with each other, partly because they have different type of different timelines, within which they operate. But a number of things have changed, I guess. One is that, of course, there's a lot happening on the climate space. Countries are beginning to act and also work towards creating transformative systems. You can't hear me, yeah? Is that better? Yeah. And so yeah, I mean the climate imperative itself is kind of forcing us to create the conditions to be able to work together. And of course the other thing that makes the whole technical assistance or the ETC type of style very relevant is that the work that we end up doing is for researchers, it's a godsend, because it grounds our work into the real world. And then the other aspect is also what John was talking about, which is this whole question around national ownership. Of course, that's open to debates. I mean, sometimes people think that national ownership is simply governments owning the direction of travel, but rather, I think what is interesting for us is the way in which we are giving national ownership a much broader kind of definition, where of course governments are involved, private sector, as well as NGOs. Now, in terms of our engagement with the ETC and through the RRF, there were a number of areas. For example, the whole systems study in Kenya. There was a request that came from the Ministry of Energy in Kenya, where we mobilized colleagues in CCG to be able to, modelers mainly, to work with Kenyan counterparts, but also Kenyan academics as well. So in a sense, we are bringing in academics as well as policymakers within countries, essentially for the first time, to work together. I mean, it is often the case that academics and policymakers in many developing countries don't really, they tend to occupy very different sort of pathways, and often governments tend to come to donors to provide the kind of technical support, who then go to their experts. But I think what we're doing now is to really bring national actors, both policymakers, but also the academics, research colleagues in countries, to be able to work on specific projects. Now, this one in Kenya, for instance, also has a training program built to it in osmosis modeling. This is open source modeling. So it has all the dimensions of transfer of knowledge, but also making sure that knowledge is very much embedded within national institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Matt, we had a brief conversation at the beginning. You obviously sit across a number of programs, so it'd be great to hear from you how ETC and the RRF fits in. How are you building success, and sort of give us that big picture overview of where the UK government sees this.
That's great, thank you. So there's quite a lot of architecture and quite a lot of alliances that have developed, and I think that is it's a reflection of the breadth of the energy transition space and the national context. So sometimes. Speaking as someone who has to occasionally, speak to ministers and explain how this all fits together, you have to say, we need to go into deeper dialogues with different countries about different aspects of the transition, and so that's going to look as though it's quite a complicated space. Actually, one of the things I think that the Energy Transition Council has been able to do, and one of the things that it's actually going to do in response to the Glasgow breakthroughs and the power breakthrough recommendations, is it's been very effective at being transparent, being open, being multilateral and actually saying, okay, let's look at what's on offer, because these big institutions have been around the table, because it's a partner-driven dialogue. So we're, largely, I don't like to use the word donor countries so much, but countries that are contributing resources are generally in listening mode to what the need is. This has proved, I think, a very attractive and a very useful way of countries to go saying, well, okay, what is the effort doing in a particular country like Vietnam or in the Philippines, and also what is it not doing, and how quickly can we address that point? So I think one of the things which I think has been really helpful has been that sense of bringing together what could be quite a complicated landscape and making it clearer and making it more responsive. And also, to answer your point, looking forward, it's maintaining a relationship. So it's been 2 years since the council met for the first time. I think we've met 5 times, because it's been a virtual conversation with ministers. It's really quite easy to do it quite frequently. So you have this sort of iterative, ongoing conversation, and generally it's not. I mean, we're doing a conversation about the RRF today on an open platform, and we had some conversation this morning at the ministerial, but generally it's a closed conversation. So you have this sort of ongoing, quite trust-building conversation, which then rapidly links through to technical support. So I think for us, looking forward, and with the spirit of implementation and looking through the next cycle through the UAE presidency, and then looking at the next couple of years, I think for us it's going to be about keeping that high trust, enduring conversation, deepening with countries, and as countries in their own context.
Someone else is causing that.
There we go. I'm glad that wasn't me, or an electronic reaction to what I was saying. That'd be terrible. But so just the final point I was going to make is to maintain that ongoing contact and that sort of trust relationship. It also allows an iterative support function. And what I mean by that is, there are bigger funds in the world, but the point of the RRF is that it's very agile. And so as countries are progressing along their low carbon ambition, there is the ability to keep coming back with extra pieces of the puzzle quite rapidly to help support a country on a journey. So I think it's that, constancy and iteration and coordination are the things that I think are going to be the real strengths for the ETC and the RRF over the next couple of years.
Great, thank you very much for that. I really like all of your comments, and what I think I'm going to do is ask you all a quick question and give a sort of 2-minute answer. And then this is the audience warning. I'm then going to come and ask the audience for questions, so start thinking about what you would like to ask the panelists. The question I wanted to ask is, what do you think, what more needs to be done to improve the link between technical assistance and then this sort of long-term targets and political dialogue? So give me a few thoughts on that, and then we will open it out to the floor. Who wants to go? Sorry.
We seem to have established an order, so it only seems fair. I've had the longest rest. When I'm looking at the general technical assistance and climate finance space, I have a couple of observations. I think that we need to do more in the technical assistance space to pave the way for the investments that are needed, both in the public sector and the private sector. I feel as though we need to bring the banks and the private sector closer into the formulation of the scopes of work on the technical assistance side. And I feel that is something we could do that would actually help accelerate finance, which ultimately is one of the things that's slowing down the transition. So I'd really like us to think really forensically about that. I also think that platforms like the ETC give us, on the social and political side, really good indicators of some of the blockages that are there politically. And so this feedback loop, without breaking any of the bonds of confidentiality and intelligence, but these are the types of problems that need more political solutions, and we'd like to work on them together. Creating that feedback loop, I think, is something that we can do more of. The other thing I think that we can do better in general is fund things at scale. So we are quite good at dividing things up into projects and slices, and we're quite good at making people jump through hoops for renewals. And what we aren't very good at is working together to triangulate on the really big opportunities and leaning in collectively. So I think this is something we will all be hearing quite a lot through this COP. My sense is that means a seriousness of intent across the political, the financial, and the donor community around the really big opportunities, and being bold enough and confident enough to say, the next 3 to 5 years are when we really, really want to roll up our sleeves, particularly on the energy transition, and identifying those opportunities and working on them together.
Great, thank you for going first. John, can I turn to you next?
Yeah, sure. So I would agree with what you said there, and maybe just build on it a little bit. So we really need urgent action, and we still need to go through the planning stages. There's a lot of focus on the planning and how to get to where we're going. But I think that was last year's COP. I think the message coming out of last year's COP was increasing ambition and laying out the ambition. I think the message from this year going forward is, let's get this done now. So we don't have the perfect political, technical, policy and regulatory environment, but it's really time that a lot of development support, technical assistance is focused on the project preparation and getting the sector moving, getting the renewables on the grid. So at ETP, our technical assistance is by default now, anything we do, we include as an end goal, we measure the success in the megawatts or gigawatts of power projects that will go online. And I think this is really critical, and I think this messaging ties in with the political dialogue that takes place. And then maybe an obvious point, what just hasn't been said today, is as we target the end goal, and we're targeting online renewables, we always need to embed the just transition throughout this. So now is also the time, as we go past the theoretical power development plans and 5, 10, 15, 20-year generation plans, now is the time to ensure that at every step, every level, that the just elements of the transition are embedded throughout. And this, of course, needs to be taken up at the political dialogue level. Thanks.
Thank you. I like your comment on let's get things done, but also the need to embed the just transition. Jakob, do you want any comments to build on or add to what's been said?
Yeah, I mean, I can build a little bit. I mean, I think one area, I'm not sure how it can be brought in, is to kind of widen the conversation beyond finance and technology towards areas which might unlock, some social and cultural related type of initiatives that can actually, support some of the projects, or new projects that could actually lead us into avenues, into territories that we haven't really looked at. The other thing is perhaps also to think in terms of, programmatic. What we don't want to find out after a few years is just that we have very successful projects, but the sum of all these may not add up to something significant. So that's something, to think about. And then the third point is there's a lot of learning that's going on. Lots of projects, lots of learning, lots of actors have participated. So how do we cultivate this into a platform where this knowledge can be harnessed, especially to create relationships between countries? Some countries may not have, for instance, sufficient capacity. And is there room that the ETC can facilitate sharing of expertise and sharing of personnel? Thanks.
Great. And Matt, finally, if you'd like to have a crack at it, but questions, please do think of them. I'll be coming to you in a minute.
Very good. Well, I'm just going to build a little bit, firstly, on what Rebecca said. this whole thing about linking through to private investment more quickly. I think I heard a remark a few weeks ago where there's sometimes a danger that first the government does a technical study, maybe a philanthropy does a technical study, then an MDB does a technical study, and then eventually the private sector does an investment study, and 4 or 5 years later, we're still doing technical studies on the same problem. And I think there has to be a more efficient way of linking through the different forms of funding together more quickly to leverage, and hopefully doing less repetitive technical studies together. I think there's definitely a streamlining, and that's something we should look into. And I think that will in part answer that second bit you said, which I totally agree with, was we've got to find ways to scale this up, stack this up quicker. And I think the developments in South Africa, and then the other partnerships which are now moving forwards, I think is an incredibly interesting way of people much more urgently going, we need a higher level political outcome, and we need to amass larger sources of funding, and we need to make sure it all adds up and doesn't duplicate. And I think that's, again, I keep going back to the coordination thing. It's hugely important that people understand where they're adding value and how this fits together. The other thing, just thinking about the ETC and what the RRF does, I think with all of these big stacks that are turning up, these big platforms that are standing up, there's still difficult stuff that needs to be sorted through. And I was thinking a couple of difficult areas, things like power purchase agreements, things like, how do you have a discussion about local content rules, which are increasingly important. And particularly, I think what is just such an understated area is how are we sharing the knowledge about the actual local, regional, people-focused transitions that need to take place. I think we're starting to get into that, but they need to be done sensitively, and sometimes there's sort of smaller groups, smaller initiative, closed door discussion at a political level can be quite helpful there. So I think we shouldn't forget the value we can add whilst these bigger piles of money are being gratefully put together with higher ambition around some of these platforms. So just a few thoughts.
Great, thank you very much, everybody at the front. Would anybody like to ask a question of the panelists? We have 2 already, great. Good, I gave you warning.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Jakob said. Sorry, Mark Hulls from Imperial College and the Climate Compatible Growth Program as well. Jakob, as an academic and as an African, I guess it's also the case that there is some value to have academia sort of in the back end, because there's this, it's a bit divorced from the political process, but at the same time can create empowerment. So, when the ETC has moved on and so on, there's increased agency in the country. And I just wondered if that's, we were talking about the secret sauce of the ETC. I wonder if that's not something that's really valuable from a trust building point of view. And if you wouldn't mind reflecting on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, that's something we often talk about. He tells me I'm African. I tell him the same thing, because of course we all know that Mark grew up in South Africa. Absolutely, I think we've seen so many initiatives in the past, so many wonderful initiatives in the past. There's one I remember, for instance, knowledge and KR, knowledge and research. This is going back into the 90s, where there was a huge amount of energy and development expertise that was built up in the UK. And then, when the program kind of was discontinued, then we all kind of migrated in our own different ways. So that was a capacity that was lost, I would say, and it had to be rebuilt. But I think, the same would apply for countries as well. Once you engage, it would be something that gives you the seeds to be able to do more. And in some ways, I guess this is what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about getting academics, for instance, in the north and in the south interacting, actually creating value and for that relationship to be sustained in beyond the ETCs and doing some great things into the future. Right? So I think that's something certainly the ETC has given us, and certainly that's something also where we are trying to do within CCG. So when we walk away, knowing that we've built institutions and we've actually mobilized sufficient capacity for a self-regenerating type of knowledge system in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got another question here on the front.
Yeah, thank you for this seminary. I think that's this is why we have to participate in a CAP, because really this is the great thing we have to know. For example, about energy. I'm coming from Niger, and Niger is one of the country chosen by UK for implementation of energy, renewable energy platform. So I'm very proud to be here and to learn about really what is the intention for transition of energy transition. So my principal question is how to go to the energy transition in Africa, for example. Which choice we have to go to do in this side is to go for energy which can empower agriculture, for example, because this is the principal activity under pastoralism, meaning livestock, or just the energy in in cities. So this is another type or another form of energy we have to go. And how will you, which approach to make this implementation according to the climate condition you have in the countries? Because Niger, my country, is one of the sun, how it's calling, sun energy radiation. So will you choose solar energy or wind energy, or you will mix? This is interesting to know about, and that's why I'm very happy to be here, and I think that we need this kind of seminary and this kind of proposition to be inclusive, really. And I hear about the importance to go for dialogue, to include every actors, because the problem is the financement of this transition. But sometimes it's coming through some actors which just stay at the border. So nobody know about really the information and how the possibility to access to these opportunities. Thank you very much.
I think John's going to come in first on this, but Jakob, would you like? Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that is a massive, massive question. And if we lock the doors, we can stay here all night to answer that. How to bring the energy transition to Africa? Same question, how to bring the energy transition anywhere. And I'm sure all panelists want to have a go at answering this in a short space of time. So I'll go very quickly and just touch on 1 or 2 points and then pass the microphone down. So the policy framework of the country is a good starting point. So political ambition and then trying to bring the policy framework into place. And I think this is what we've seen with the JETP countries. I don't know the process that went behind that, but I'm sure a lot of it was to see which countries are able to receive such types of financing, how close they are, how much coal is in the grid and how much potential is there to move forward. And a lot of this is to do with the political environment. The second one I want to mention, just because we're here with National Grid, and no, we haven't mentioned grids yet. The grids is a huge impediment to the energy transition. So making pathways on upgrading the grids is a huge concern. So I just want to pitch something. You mentioned something that I'm hanging on to, that this is COP27, so this is a place to ask this. So maybe because we're at the COP27, I'm just going to pitch an idea. I know working in Indonesia, Philippines and Vietnam that the grid barriers, the grid impediments are very difficult. A lot of discussions about finance, bringing in the finance to upgrade the grids, but I know that the national grid are at the forefront of grid development, and I know that it's not easy, and finance doesn't solve this problem alone. It's needed, but innovation in the grid is a huge requirement, and it's different in every country. It's different on the energy mix. I've had conversations with National Grid and NREL trying to bring them to the region, but there isn't an easy mechanism to engage with National Grid or NREL that I'm aware of anyway, because of it's an institutional setup. So I would love to find ways to bring a superpower of grids, maybe through the philanthropic community, to the stage, because this has a huge role to play, and I don't yet know the solutions for the country I work in. I haven't answered your questions, but it is a massive question. Happily have dinner with you tonight, though, to discuss more.
So I'm going to pass you on to Jakob, but in the meantime I'm going to plug the next session in here, which is about the Green Grid Initiative, which is about how people like Grid, National Grid, are taking our expertise to other countries around the world. But enough of that, right? Jakob, sorry.
No, I'll be very quick. I mean, the question has to be back to you. What do you want to achieve? What do you want Niger to do? So I mean, we can't answer that question. The question has to, you have to set the agenda in order to be able to pull together the direction that Niger wants to travel. And then, of course, I mean, the ETC type initiatives can support once that demand actually comes. So the first question is, what do you want? You know what I mean?
Rebecca, did you want to come in?
Not really. Just to say that there is a global power systems transformation grid group that is available to do that job of grid planning, but that's really just a very small drop in the answer to your question. I like what your answer was. You know, it's like talk about clean air, social justice, energy access, response to climate change, and come together. Yeah.
Matt, did you have?
I was going to steal your mic and just. I think what I was about to say is about what I was about to say, which is probably about how we can help. But
yeah, and just to say, under the broader ETC and some of the things that are going on, so we have a regional training activity in Africa every year. This one will be in Namibia. It's open to everybody to come along. We'll take analysts through their power system and their energy system and how to go from where it is now to fully provide access, as well as develop an investment plan, as well as think about how to structure some of the financing. The course material is all available in English, but we're translating it to French. So we're hoping that there'll be a francophone version of that in time. And please just do be in contact. I think there are a number of things that are available, and it's linked up with the GPST and other things. And I think from the Energy Transitions Council space and the Green Grids Initiative in particular, very soon there's a transformation playbook that's coming out that hopefully just demystifies the space a little bit to get started. But we'll grab your card afterwards. Thank you.
We've got about 6 minutes left. We can always end early. There's a question over there from Louise.
Hi, so I'm Louise Clark-White from National Grid. I just wanted to pick up on the just transition point. John, you mentioned the JETPs, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, and we've heard today that Indonesia's has been announced at the G20. It's a bit of a step back question, but how do you think the Energy Transition Council's RRF should play into the JETPs, and how are they going to interact, and how is it going to kind of deliver what the JETPs are trying to do?
I was going to say, John, do you want to? I'm happy to answer that.
I have thoughts, but you have the authority, so I'd go with you.
I feel like saying I have no authority on this panel. So I think it's a so my relatively simple thoughts. Having been quite closely involved with the South Africa JETP and sort of seeing some of the machinery that gets built to do it, I think you have to understand that it's quite a it's quite a big political and technical beast that gets built. So, that document quite often it goes up to leaders. It links back to NDCs. It's a national expression of ambition, and it's a multinational. The international partners group have to come together and work that through together, and that's got quite a big overhead to it, and it will have a certain, there'll be a certain pace at which it unfolds. Now, the reason I'm saying all that first is, I think around the margins of that work, there is going to be some, people are going to say, well, how much money am I going to spend? And what do I get for it? And what's the policy reform that's going to take place to allow greater ambition? And the minute you ramp up investment, the minute you then have to think about how's the policy landscape going to change and how that's going to work in the national context. And the JETPs themselves don't automatically bring the extra skills and knowledge and capacity building that will enable what is, again, an iterative process to take place. So I almost feel like as that jacks up the amount of money, hopefully it jacks up the ambition, hopefully it jacks up the scale of the transformation, it's going to ask a lot more difficult questions that they're going to need answering to keep that moving forward. I have a huge amount of faith in the way that the JETPs can work at the sort of senior level, but I think there's a really important space, to work in association where, and again, I go back to the, being quite nimble, being quite political, and linking it to the technical work of the RRF. I think there's going to be huge opportunities to be quite nimble, quite swift in supporting the delivery of those JETPs. And let's just be honest, those JETPs are a sort of an initial down payment on an energy transition for those countries. I think for South Africa, there was $8.5 billion on the table. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the South African plan was for $85 billion, I think. So this is the first wave of support, and as those waves of support pick up, there's going to be more work that's going to be needed on capacity support, policy development. And I think nimble initiatives like this can really help. There's a bigger space to work in, and hopefully more speed as well. John, was that?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So as an energy transition practitioner on the ground, the JETPs bring a huge amount of excitement. It's a mechanism to accelerate the energy transition with just at its core. So this is incredibly exciting. In a roundabout way to answer your question, I think ETC, in the case of Indonesia, FIRE, have a massive role to play. I think it links back to my first point, that all the structures are in place to deliver on the ground, and they've taken a long time to set up. My organization, ETP, and the ETC has taken 2 years to get the relationship where it is now. And this is true of all the stakeholders on the ground. The governments are buying in, and if we keep trying to reinvent the wheel, it's confusing for all the stakeholders involved. In Indonesia, they've just brought on their own country platform led by the government, and they're now used to talking with the ETC. The stakeholders are already in communication with each other. So I think it'd be a real shame not to build on the structures that are there. ETP, we have a role to play. We think we could provide a very good service to the JETP and to the ETC, bringing the governments and philanthropies together, and we see what the ETC can do differently, the RRF. I think it's really important not to lose these institutions and start afresh.
Well, thank you very much for those questions. We're about out of time, so I'm going to close the session today, but I do want to say thank you very much to John, Rebecca, Jakob, and particularly Matt, who stood in at the last minute. Your comments were great and then sparked loads of questions from the audience. That's always a sign of a good session, so thank you very much, and thanks very much for coming along, and hopefully see you at the next session on Green Grids Initiative.